Before you listen here, ask yourself whether truth matters to you, whether it really actually matters to you. See, I have to believe that the truth, however complicated, however unpalatable, must win out. That objective reality eventually trumps any amount of lies, because the truth, reality, existence as it is ultimately inescapable. Sooner or later it comes crashing in, and you have to deal with things as they are, not how you wish they would be, or how some fork-tongued grifter has told you they are, in order to line their pockets or serve their masters. I especially want you to think about Southport and the riots that followed that. They told you that the attacker was an immigrant. He wasn't. They told you he was a Muslim. He wasn't. People were hurt and arrested, mosques were vandalized, hotels were set fire to, because of lies spread by the likes of Robinson, Farage, etc. And yet there doesn't, yet, seem to have been much of a price paid for their stochastic terrorism. Robinson's arrest is on an unrelated matter. But they lied. What they said wasn't true. It led to consequences for other people, and that should matter. The grooming scandal here in the UK is also complicated, nuanced, distorted by the media, and the grift and hate off the back of it has been going on for longer, and it is an atrocity, but yet again it's not what's been sold to you. So, does the truth matter? The whole truth? Or doesn't it? Hello lovelies. Today we're delving into the absolute cesspool of misinformation and nonsense swirling around about the UK grooming gang scandal, since the Conservatives decided to double down on it, despite having been in power for over a decade recently, and having done little about it, and since Elon decided to retweet Tommy Robinson's, quote, documentary, unquote, which is a load of old toss, and obliquely the reason why he's in prison. Some of you sons of bitches decided to give me a hard time over introducing some fucking facts about all of this, daring to provide a more nuanced perspective, and I realised I was feeling bad when I had absolutely no goddamn reason to. You were the people uncritically repeating bullshit spewed by racists, not bothering to learn the whole context or to check the research, and you were making dumbass demands of me based on disinformation that you had swallowed whole and uncritically. I have zero reason to feel bad about correcting you, and some distant hope that at least some of you are still amenable to reality. So buckle up, buttercups, because we're about to take a tour through the murky waters of bigotry, political opportunism, moral panic and willful ignorance. If you're easily offended by the brutal truth or you're allergic to facts, sit this one out in a vat of acid. Now that's real acid, people, so goggles on. Let's start with the basics. Over the last decade, we've seen horrific cases emerge in towns like Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford, though these are by no means the only ones, they're just the high-profile ones. Groups of men were found to, and women, come to that, were found to have systematically abused vulnerable children, primarily girls, over long periods, while authorities appeared to turn a blind eye or failed to be aware of what was going on. Now, make no mistake, these crimes are monstrous, and the victims deserve justice, support, and a hell of a lot more than the empty platitudes that they've been given. But of course, nothing is sacred in the realm of public discourse. Tragedy becomes fodder for the worst kind of opportunists, and an opportunity to cast blame on vulnerable communities. So, cue the parade of grifters. Most recently, Elon Musk, the billionaire tech guy who never met a controversy he didn't want to wade into, recently retweeted none other than Tommy Robinson. Yes, that's Tommy Robinson. Tommy 10 names. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, to give him his real name. The UK's resident loud hate-monger and professional shit-stirrer. Musk's endorsement of Robinson's nonsense is a baffling plot twist, but here we are. You have to deal with reality as it is. You'd think someone running multiple million-dollar companies would have better things to do than engage with the UK's most notorious thumb. But hey, I guess that Twitter engagement isn't going to farm itself even when you own the platform. In case you're blissfully unaware, and I'm jealous of you if you are, Robinson has made a career out of demonising Muslims under the flimsy guise of protecting women and children. Never mind that his methods usually involve whipping up mobs, harassing random people, and conveniently forgetting that he's been to prison more times than he's even walked past a library. Oh, and fun fact, he's in prison right now for repeatedly libelling a 15-year-old boy in defiance of a court order. Classy fellow. So let's tackle the elephant in the room. The myth that grooming gangs are exclusively a Muslim problem, or even more specifically, a Pakistani problem. This trope has been shoved down our throats by Robinson and his ilk for years, and now the party that presided over much of this is joining in, trying to appease and appeal to the far right. But it's not true. A Home Office report from 2020 made it crystal clear. Offenders involved in group-based child sexual exploitation come from all ethnic backgrounds, with the majority overall being white. Shocking, I know. Turns out paedophilia isn't a race-specific hobby, and in a white-majority country most offenders also happen to be white. Shocker. Now, in these high-profile cases, the majority were British Muslims, mostly British Pakistani, but that is only those cases, not the majority of cases. And even in those cases, there were white men and white women who were also involved. So we've already had reports and inquiries and investigations into all this. That 2020 report, by the way, was followed up by a statement from the police watchdog in 2023. They found that most offenders were white, overall, when it comes to organised grooming gangs. But why let facts get in the way of a good racist narrative? It's almost as if the people screaming the loudest about grooming gangs aren't actually interested in stopping child exploitation. They just want to blame brown people who go to a funny-shaped church. It doesn't help that these are the cases that got the most attention in the media, partly because they fit that narrative, that anti-immigrant narrative, and that so much of our press is right-wing. While they were mixed in terms of criminals, some of these gangs, the ones that were high-profile, were mostly brown people. So that doesn't help either, but it's not the whole truth. Other instances, such as a large-scale grooming gang in Cornwall that was almost exclusively white, didn't get the same media exposure. And that has created a distorted image, which grifters like Robinson have been exploiting. Now, I know some of you are going to clutch your pearls and cry foul, but Grim, there were Asian grooming gangs, and yes, there have been cases involving a majority of men of South Asian descent. No one is denying that, but they are not the only case, and certainly not the majority of cases. You can't treat these individual high-profile cases as representative of the entire issue. It's not only racist, it's dangerous. Dangerous to the very kids that you want to protect. Because while everyone's focused on perpetuating this myth, actual victims, particularly of groups that are outside the stereotype, are being ignored. And the reasons that their victims are being ignored for a cheap, easy, racist narrative. So it allows other abusers to get away scot-free for longer. And interference by little Tommy 10 names places the convictions of actual criminals at risk as he interferes with the trials by his presence, and also endangers people who aren't criminals but who fit his narrative. Fair trials are important. And let's talk about the real world fallout from all of this misinformation. So, going back again, do you remember the Southport riots? Disinformation and misinformation about a horrendous mass murder of young girls led to blame being placed wrongly on immigrants. Attacks on mosques and asylum centres and more followed. The perpetrator wasn't even an immigrant, let alone Muslim. Facts have to matter. We have to choose for them to matter. People were attacked, innocent lives were upended, people got arrested, acting out outrage over something that wasn't what they were told it was. This wasn't just a little online spat or a flame war, it was a violent eruption directly fueled by lies and prejudice. And this isn't an isolated incident. Time and again, disinformation has led to violence. People like Musk, Trump, Farage and Robinson, with big platforms and influence, know damn well what they're doing when they fan these flames, but they don't seem to care. But we should. You should be as suspicious of them as you are of anything else. There's no accountability when the mob descends, and the people get hurt are almost always the vulnerable, the marginalised and the innocent. So, if grooming gangs aren't just a Muslim problem, then what's the real issue? It's simple and yet at the same time complex. There is an institutional and systemic failure to protect poor and vulnerable kids in rundown areas. These abuses were allowed to continue primarily because the victims were often working or underclass girls involved in gangs and substance abuse, the undeserving poor, that somehow were seemed to have thought to have it coming in some way. Authorities dismissed them as troubled or complicit in their abuse. Even so, abuse is abuse. Classism, not racism, is the common thread running through these scandals, along with deprivation and a lack of social investment in these areas. Something that renders kids and teenagers vulnerable, not just to this, but to county line gangs and other forms of exploitation. The people in power didn't care because they didn't value the lives of the victims. And that, my friends, is the real scandal and the real problem that has to be addressed. A complex problem requiring complex and large-scale solutions, which is a damn sight less catchy than "oh my god, brown people." We need to focus on fixing these systemic and structural issues that enable abuse, starting from base principles of opportunity, housing and education, not scapegoating entire communities of minorities. Real solutions require investment in communities and social services, better support for victims, and holding institutions accountable when they fail. What we don't need is a billionaire on Twitter with zero understanding of what's actually going on, retweeting a guy who can't even keep his facts straight long enough to stay out of prison. So let me wrap this up with a final note of sarcasm. If you're ever tempted to take Tommy Robinson seriously, just remember, the man's rap sheet is longer than his list of achievements. He's not a journalist, he's not a hero, he's barely human. He's a professional bigot who profits off the suffering of others and pandering to knuckle-draggers who react emotionally rather than thinking rationally. People who don't want to hear complex but real solutions and want to hear simple but false solutions. Anyone amplifying his message, whether they're a tech billionaire or just some random sub 100 IQ guy on Facebook, is complicit in spreading dangerous and harmful lies. None of which is to say that there aren't some cultural, religious and political issues at play. There's some suggestion, albeit contradicted by other reports, that fear of being seen as racist may have provided some friction on investigating these cases. But that's nowhere near as important as the classist issues that were involved. But it's only a minority of these cases that involve South Asian paedophiles. Or we should perhaps better say, these paedophiles that happen to be South Asian. The majority involved in organised grooming are still white, I'm afraid, as one would expect given our population demographics. I'm no fan of religion, any religion, and Islam is a particularly nasty religion, if only because it's relatively unreformed and hasn't had the tar beaten out of it yet by secularism. But that's not the point here. So that's all for today. Remember, truth should matter. Don't let racists with an agenda rewrite it or cloud it from you. Stay informed, stay critical, place things in their full context, and yes, all of that requires work, and that's terribly boring. But maybe, at least, just think twice before you retweet someone who thinks libeling teenagers is a fun pastime. Zang.
Tommy Robinson, he's a man made of meat, shouting loud, making noise where the gammon meets. twat you can't ignore, fighting for some cash, always asking for more. Tommy Robinson. Some say he's fascist, some say he's a fool. Tommy Robinson dares to be racist, breaking every rule. Tommy Robinson drowns in the shallow end of the gene pool. From Luton town to the heart of the fray, Tommy takes a stand till he runs away. Hate and controversy, it's all intertwined, with a sky beat beating on his pink behind. Tommy Robinson. Some say he's fascist, some say he's a fool. Tommy Robinson dares to be racist, breaking every rule. Tommy Robinson drowns in the shallow end of the gene pool. Skanking left, but he's skanking right. Tommy's spreading bullshit, starting up a fight, with the horns blaring loud and the drums keeping time. Mocking gammon's gonna make you feel alive tonight. Tommy Robinson. Some say he's fascist, some say he's a fool. Tommy Robinson dares to be racist, breaking every rule. Tommy Robinson drowns in the shallow end of the gene pool. Tommy Robinson drowns in the shallow end of the gene pool. Tommy Robinson, face like an arse or a builder's thumb. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, that is his real name. Remind me why it is that he changed it again. Andrew McMaster's a name that he's gone by. Booger's off to Ireland and we all know why. Wayne King's a nundy plume for this doggish twat. Divorce drunk bellend and a god for prots. Tommy